Welcome, viewers and listeners, to another edition of CHP Talks. I'm here. I'm in northern BC, but I'm with Mr. Lloyd Leugner, a repeat guest on our program, and he's coming to us from Cochrane, Alberta. Lloyd, thanks for joining us today again.
You are welcome. I'm glad to be here.
And for those who did not possibly hear our last interview, just give a very short introduction here. Lloyd Leugner is a graduate of the Canadian Military School of Electrical and Mechanical Engineers, the apprentice training program. He spent 15 years as a technical maintenance and reliability specialist with the Canadian Army, including service with NATO in Europe and 3 United Nations peacekeeping missions on the Gaza Strip, Cyprus, and Sinai. He was released honorably in 1972 with the rank of warrant officer, holding military master vehicle technician trade certification before starting his business. And there's much more to say about Lloyd, but we want to get to the topic that Lloyd is prepared to share with us today, and that has to do with the fentanyl business, the tariffs, the trade, the U.S. border, all kinds of things that are going on. And Lloyd has done a lot of looking into this. And Lloyd, I don't know where to start. Do we start with tariffs or start with fentanyl? And there's an awful lot, and Chinese foreign influence on Canadian politics might be kind of the keynote for us there.
Well, I'd like to begin this discussion with a comment about the fact that, in my opinion, President Trump did Canada a favor by bringing this information to Canadians, certainly sharing it with as many people as he has, and in my opinion, President Trump, although he's been criticized and called a bully and all kinds of other things, he has really attempted to bring Canada into the realm of protecting North America. And in order to do that, he has challenged the Canadian government at protecting our southern border, the 49th parallel, of course. He's also introduced the serious problem of fentanyl smuggling and manufacturing in Western Canada. The Chinese communists have been infiltrating North America for years. In fact, I would guess that China probably owns about 25% of Canada right now. And part of the problem is the complicity of the Trudeau government. Because as you know, or as many people should understand, the Trudeau family, both the father and the son, are communists. And what Trudeau, or what Mr. Trump has done, is he has encouraged people to understand the complicity of the Trudeau government in establishing the problems related to fentanyl smuggling, the money laundering that's going on as a result of that. And there are, of course, problems with smuggling across the 49th parallel. All of these fentanyl drugs and other drugs, of course, cocaine and so on, are being smuggled across the 49th parallel into America. At the present time, and one of the things I've learned in my research, is that 100,000 Americans are killed by drug overdoses. And that's serious. And if you compare that with what's going on in Canada, approximately, our population is approximately 1/9 of the American population. And that means that 1/9 of that number of 100,000 has been killed in Canada. So, and our government is oblivious to this. One of the things that Canadians should do is obtain a copy of a book by Sam Cooper. It's called Wilful Ignorance. And it outlines in detail the complicity of the Trudeau government in the fentanyl manufacture and smuggling, and the money laundering that's been going on in the two major centers in Canada, and that's Vancouver and of course in Toronto. The other issue that's related to this is the American investigators into these issues. They will not trust the RCMP anymore. They will not trust the Canadian Border Services people, because they know that some of those people are corrupt. And that's another problem we have in Canada. The serious corruption regarding these issues of fentanyl, the money laundering, and of course the problems with corruption within the Trudeau government. So that's basically a summary of some of the things I've learned in the last, I'd say 2 to 3 years that I've researched this material.
Yeah, well, thank you. That Sam Cooper's book, I have to get a copy myself. I have listened to him on several YouTube interviews, but willful ignorance, that's what Kent Hovind says. His simplification of that is dumb on purpose. So we don't want to be dumb on purpose. We want to be aware of what's going on. And I have to admit, this is embarrassing, but when Mr. Trump said that, kind of launched this, the tariff threat, I guess, and he said that these terrorists and fentanyl was coming in from Canada, I honestly thought that was baloney. I thought, what are you talking about? It's all coming from Mexico. But I have since learned that he was absolutely right, that Vancouver is a port that has very little regulation or inspections when these containers come in from overseas. They can come in almost unobstructed with hardly any vetting, and that's a complete problem in itself. But on top of that, the province of British Columbia currently has no laws against drug use, which is amazing. They're actually helping drug addicts get hold of drugs, and that's another problem. But and then when this money begins to affect politics, there's another Bible verse that I think is pretty keen here. It says, "When a ruler hearkens to lies, all his servants are evil." And when this money and this corruption gets to the top of the top of the heap here in Canada, maybe even the Prime Minister's office, the Liberal Party, and various political campaigns. We've heard a little bit about it, but again, the Prime Minister and his party have basically kept the police services from doing a proper investigation. They didn't want to really get into it for obvious reasons. And so Canadians are blissfully unaware, and I use that term blissfully, that there's anything going on. And so I agree with you. Trump has done us a service by bringing this to our attention. So where does it start? How did this get going, and how can we get a better handle? How can we educate Canadians on this very complex issue?
That's a difficult question because, and I'll just go back a bit here. Over the past 5 years, 5 to 6 years, when the COVID problem came up, I've been sending newsletters to all of my contacts, explaining, in my opinion, that most of these issues were all lies. That COVID itself was a lie. That it was a scam. That it was a made up scam. Intent really to kill people, because the vaccines are killing people right now. So I've been sending newsletters to people all across the country and attempting to educate people. I've also been organizing, or I was part of the organizational group that started an organization called the Cochrane Freedom Alliance. And we've been holding monthly meetings for the last 5 years. And I've been bringing in speakers who are knowledgeable about some of these issues, like COVID, like the vaccines, and so on. And in the last couple of meetings, we've actually been discussing the Trump tariffs and why Trump was right in applying tariffs to Canada. In fact, and Canadians don't know this, they don't realize this, but we've been charging tariffs on American products for years. For example, on milk and cheese and eggs and poultry products.
Some of the information you sent me said that the triads and the cartels that are operating in Canada use false invoicing and front companies. Trade money laundering experts say that are securing meth and fentanyl shipments into the United States in exchange for sending legal commodities to Mexico or China. So drug shipments are often concealed within legitimate and counterfeit goods. And they mention things like avocados and limes, things that we buy in the grocery store and we can hardly afford anymore. And part of the reason is because even those products are being, caught up, or the market's being cornered by some of these international cartels. And it's all tied together with this fentanyl trade.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. What they've done, what the cartels, the Mexican cartels, and the Chinese triads have done, they have actually included ordinary businesses into this smuggling operation. We might get a shipment of avocados, as you say, but with that shipment of avocados, we've got fentanyl included. And you mentioned the Port of Vancouver. 1%, only 1% of the cargo that comes into the Port of Vancouver is inspected by Canadian inspectors. Only 1%. So all of these huge cargo containers that come across from China end up in Vancouver. They're shipped all across the country. We have no idea what's in these cargoes. None at all.
Well, you got all the top leaders of the major political parties. They're rattling their swords and, they're not going to put up with this. They're going to teach Trump a lesson. They're going to, dollar for dollar, and this kind of rhetoric we hear going on, tit for tat. And the reality is, number one, fighting Mr. Trump is not a very practical proposal, as Mr. Zelensky found out the other day. You're right. Canadians need to know this, because they might simmer down a little bit from the high-sounding rhetoric and the anger. You hear a lot of people, "Well, I'm not going to buy American anymore." Well, the reality is we don't grow too many avocados in Canada. We need this international trade. But there are maybe some practices in our country that we need to get a hold of so that we can manage these trade discussions, on a more fair and secure basis.
What concerns me about these issues is that our politicians, our so-called leaders, like Mr. Poilievre and Trudeau and now Carney, these people have no idea. They have not done their own homework regarding these tariffs and the tariffs that we charge America. Canada claims to be a free trader. That's not the case at all. We are not free traders. In fact, we don't even have free trade between our provinces. I can't buy a bottle of wine from British Columbia and bring it to Alberta. I can't buy a case of beer in Quebec and bring it to Ontario. I could be charged by the RCMP for smuggling. That's disgraceful. In fact, I'm not sure of the number, but I understand from the research I have done that we lose billions of dollars every year in our gross national product because of the restrictions we have across the borders of provinces. I mean, we have what interests me and amazes me more than anything is that if we're not allowed to do business with our neighboring province next door, what disturbs me even more is that even the cultures of our provinces are different. And of course, you know that as well as I do.
Yeah.
The culture in British Columbia is different than the culture in Alberta. The culture in Ontario is certainly a lot different than the culture in Manitoba. So we've got serious problems in this country with internal problems that we have that our politicians have never been able to resolve, and I believe are unwilling to resolve. I think they're happy with the situation as it is. So Trump's tariffs, to me, were a wake-up call. As far as I'm concerned, we have to thank Mr. Trump for what he's done to Canada. And what disturbs me more than anything is that our politicians are not paying attention. They're not thinking this through. They're not. In fact, Mr. Poilievre, in my opinion, should be on the telephone right now to President Trump saying, how can we resolve both of these issues of tariffs, one way or the other, across borders? And how can I help you resolving the issues of fentanyl, money laundering, and all of the issues related to the Chinese interference that's going on in Canada? He should be asking Mr. Trump those questions. He should be saying, how can I help? Because obviously Trudeau is not going to do that. And Carney will not. Carney is a World Economic Forum specialist. He's a mouthpiece for the globalist entity across the world. And he will not help Canada improve their situation.
Well, these guys are using Trump as a punching bag right now. And they're, especially in the Liberal Party, they're trying to build their base by, their loud and nasty rhetoric towards Trump, as if all our problems come from him. And, most of our problems are self-generated in this country with our national debt at $1.2 trillion. And of course, the U.S. has its own debt problems that Trump is trying to resolve through Doge and whatever. But we need a good dose of Doge here in Canada, because the money that, there's way more money being thrown out the door, thrown out the windows by the current government than is going to be affected by these tariffs. For instance,
I agree with you.
Our carbon tax is going up 21% or 19%, I forget, 19 or 21% on April 1st. This government has made no attempt to put a halt to that theft from the Canadian public through the carbon tax, and yet people seem to put up with that, and they just carry on as if nothing's wrong, and of course that's something that we need to end for sure.
Well, the carbon tax issue is a serious problem, and the new Liberal leader now, Carney, I call him carbon tax Carney, he's telling Canadians that he's going to transfer the carbon tax to industry. And he says that won't affect Canadians at all. Of course it will.
Yeah,
because all the businesses that will be charged this new carbon tax, or the movement of the carbon tax to industry, they will simply pass that on to Canadians anyway.
Yeah.
So we will still be faced with the carbon tax. So Carney is lying to Canadian people to begin with. And of course, people who believe Carney are oblivious to the serious problems regarding the carbon tax. So again, our leadership has to clean up their act. They have to understand and stop waving Canadian flags, calling Trump a bully, and look at themselves and understand that they have created the problems themselves with policies like, for example, We can't build pipelines across Canada anymore. We can't build pipelines anywhere. But Carney, with the corporations that he was involved with as a private businessman, and even the Trudeau government, we've been sending money to Asia where they can build pipelines. Carney's corporate businesses were building pipelines. I think he moved his company, or one of his companies, Brookfield Asset Management. He moved it from Toronto to New York. And Brookfield Asset Management is invested in coal mines in America. So there you go. If Carney is such an environmentalist, he's investing in coal mines in North America. So he's lying to the people about his willingness to be an environmentalist. He's lying because it's all about the money, and that's part of the problem. So I don't know where this will end, except to say that Canadian politicians have got to clean up their act. They have got to start looking at these issues and bringing in policies and programs that will resolve these issues instead of exacerbate them. And one of the men I think is critical to this is Maxime Bernier. He will quite possibly never be. He might quite possibly never form the next government in Canada or even a future government in Canada. But his ideas that we've just discussed, some of the problems related to those ideas, those Maxime Bernier suggestions will resolve some of these problems.
No.
So that's about all I can say about that, except that God help us. God help us. We are in serious trouble in this country. And I was once so proud to serve as a Canadian soldier in Canada, but I have to say that Canada is no longer my country as long as they operate like this.
Yeah. Well, we certainly believe there can be better days ahead, but that means Canadian voters have to make different choices. I think that Maxime Bernier, the People's Party, and the Christian Heritage Party that I lead are in agreement on a tremendous number of items. And he makes some good statements that we endorse. The only thing that I object is that he says we're the only party, when actually the Christian Heritage Party also stands with him on those issues. And I would love to serve as leader of the Christian Heritage Party. I would love to serve in a parliament with Maxime Bernier and the People's Party, as you know, our two groups I think could be very supportive of one another. And I like Max on a personal level, and also I think his ideas are great. I just wish he would stop saying that we're the only party, because there is another party that stands on the same principles. So where do we tie these together? I guess the political influence, the foreign influence on politicians, is something that we've known about. It's been talked about a bit in recent years, but there's never been a full investigation. We don't know the names. There were particular members of parliament whose campaigns benefited from direct money into their campaigns from particularly from the Chinese Communist Party and funneled through Canadian individuals. How do we get to the bottom of that? If the government will not authorize a proper investigation, and I don't think this Liberal government ever will, I don't know if Poilievre's government will do any difference. If, you know, we don't know who's going to be the next Prime Minister of Canada after the next election. But how do we as citizens, motivate our political leaders, whoever they may be, to actually dig down and find out where this money is coming from and put a stop to it?
Well, one of the things we have to do, and one of the things Canadians have to do, is investigate a commission that was established by the Trudeau government. This was done about 3 or 4 months ago, I believe. And this came as a result of the Conservative Party demanding that an investigation be done uh, looking into the possibility of foreign interference with these 11 or 12 members of parliament that were elected in Canada as Liberals. And that commission was called the Hogue Commission. It's spelled Hugue, I believe, the Hogue Commission. And the woman who ran that, her name was Hogue, the woman who ran that, she came back after the investigation and she simply said that there was no evidence of foreign interference. Now think about this. Ms. Hogue is part of the Liberal Party. She's involved with the Liberal Party. She was appointed by the Liberal Party to carry out this investigation. So that's the first problem. In other words, her investigation didn't prove anything. It didn't confirm anything. It didn't confirm or deny anything. All she said was that there was no evidence to indicate that there was foreign interference. There's another serious problem with regard to the Liberal Party, and that is, you've heard of George Soros. He's a wealthy billionaire, probably one of the wealthiest men in the world, and he's a communist. He doesn't claim to be a communist, but I believe he is. He's got Marxist leanings. And during the 2015 election, I've done some research on this. During the 2015 election, he actually spent millions of dollars supporting a group called the Tides Foundation in British Columbia. The Tides Foundation bought, and I say this, I mean this, they bought people who would interfere with political issues with regard to several seats in British Columbia. And as I understand it, there were 8 or 9, possibly more, seats that were won by the Liberals that otherwise would have been won by the Conservative Party in 2015. And that's another problem. We've got foreign interference not only from China, but we have foreign interference from wealthy tax-exempt corporate or tax-exempt foundations that are dumping money all over the place to buy votes for the Liberal Party. Now, I don't know if that's going to continue, but I suspect it will, because the George Soros and his family are closely related to, guess who? The Trudeau family and Chrystia Freeland. So all of these things are tied together. And so that's about all I can say about that, except
and
you know, have to understand these things.
Yeah. One of the most egregious examples of money being used for political advantage is the CBC, our national broadcasting network that Canadians pay for, over $1 billion a year. And they are actually using that platform that we pay for to confuse Canadians. I think they've done a big promotion for Mr. Carney as well. And, they will probably continue to push left-wing politicians, socialist politicians to the front. And we're paying for it. And we don't get, certainly the Christian Heritage Party does not get adequate coverage by the CBC. People don't even know we exist, many people across the country, because the CBC doesn't do much to cover the smaller parties, but they promote their favorites. And of course, right now, Mark Carney is one who will continue on with the Trudeau legacy, socialism, promoting abortion and gender confusion and massive debt. We're so far in debt. We're paying $125 million a day in interest on our national debt, and $110 million. We're using the credit cards still on top of that. Another $110 million a day. We're going deeper in debt every day. And I'm sure Mr. Carney is going to go down that same road. He's been an advisor to Trudeau through all these past years. Now he's in a position to make those public pronouncements himself.
Absolutely. In fact, I don't even turn the television on anymore, because all of the mainstream media are promoted or bought and paid for by the Trudeau government. I believe the number that has been given to the mainstream media, including CBC, CTV, and so on, I believe is $720 million in the last 12 or so years, or 10 or so years. So naturally, these mainstream media are going to promote the policies that Trudeau and his cronies want.
Yeah.
And that's part of the problem in Canada. And of course, most Canadians don't understand this. They don't believe it. Whenever I suggest that this is happening, again, they call me a fruitcake. I've even sent this information to the senators in Canada, to our Senate. I have the email addresses of every senator in Canada. I've sent this information to these people, suggesting that they look into these things, that they resolve these things, that they challenge the Trudeau government. However, that doesn't mean much. Just the other day, I believe it might have been today, maybe even last Friday, Trudeau just appointed 5 more senators. He calls them independent senators. However, we know that these 5 new senators are all engaged or have been engaged with the Liberal Party over the years. Right now, I believe there are 115 senators in Canada. I'm not sure.
105, 105.
105.
Yeah.
There you go. There are 100 of them. 100 senators right now have been appointed by Trudeau or some other Liberal Party leader. So we do not have an independent Senate. We have an unelected Marxist Senate. How can we get any resolution to any of these problems? In fact, let me make another comment. Let's assume that Mr. Poilievre is elected. Let's assume that he's elected with a majority government. He may have trouble overturning some of the policies that Mr. Trudeau established because the Senate will shoot him down. That's another serious problem.
Yeah, for sure.
And it's even worse if, under the circumstances with Carney moving up in the polls, it's possible that Mr. Poilievre may end up with a minority government. If he ends up with a minority government, he'll be able to accomplish nothing, particularly because of the Senate and the fact that the senators, most of them, are all leftists. So we've got serious problems in Canada. Serious problems that most Canadians have no understanding of, and unfortunately are unwilling to research and read about.
Yeah.
It's kind of sad. I've sent information to some of my veteran friends, and again, these are veterans who served with me or who I've known for years, and they believe that I'm a fruitcake, that I'm wrong, that I don't know what I'm talking about. So, and of course, they're unwilling to do their own research. They just simply break me off as a fool and let it go at that.
Well, the trouble is, and this is the frustration we have as people who can see beyond the veil, behind the curtain. We see what's going on there, and we try to communicate that to our fellow Canadians. And social media is one of the ways we do that, emails and other things. But if our information kind of gets lost, if people are watching CBC and CTV and reading just the Globe and Mail, they're going to get a very stilted view of what's going on in the world, and our information can get lost in the shuffle, especially when people like Trudeau call it misinformation. He's the greatest purveyor of misinformation we've had for years, all kinds of things, and we can go into detail, but we're probably going to leave some of that for another discussion, but it's really troubling and very frustrating when we're speaking a different language almost than many of our fellow citizens because they've been so overwhelmed by this deluge of false information directly from the people they should be able to trust, the government and the news media.
Well, that's true.
Yeah.
That's absolutely true. In fact, in my personal opinion, based on the research I've done for the last 5 or 6 years, since the COVID issue came along, I no longer trust any of our military leaders, or I'm sorry, our political leaders. I no longer trust them. The other concern I have, of course, is when Trump laid the tariff issue on Canada, another one of the things he was trying to get Canada to correct was our inability and our unwillingness to have a military force that was actually worthy of what we used to consider a solid military force. And Trump's, although he laid these tariffs on us, his primary objective is the protection of North America. And because we've given up any protection that we have in our northern Arctic, he's concerned about that. So one of the things he's demanded, or one of the things he wants Canadians to understand, is that our government has not done anything except create our military situation where it's nothing but woke DEI bunch of leftists. All of the good officers, all of the good flag officers, the senior generals, lieutenant generals, and so on, that served in the Canadian forces and were our backbone, they're all gone. And one of the concerns, of course, that I have is that some of those senior generals were actually badmouthed and criticized. They were charged with sexual events and so on that were all lies. And Trudeau attempted, his objective was to get rid of these senior officers so that he could bring in leftist, woke senior officers. And that's exactly what's happened to our Canadian military today. We could not fight our way across the Bow River. And I'm looking at the Bow River right now. Our military forces are nothing but vagabonds. They might as well all just go home because they're not fighting men. They're not fighting women. They have no warrior strength anymore. That's gone. And that's another concern Mr. Trump has. He wants Canada to clean up its act so that Canada can help the Americans protect North America. And of course, under the current circumstances, we can't even protect Canada, let alone help Mr. Trump protect North America.
Well, Mr. Lloyd Leugner, Tex, as some people call you, Tex. But anyway, it's a real privilege to speak with you again today. I had the extreme privilege of being in your home last week, and thank you for taking the time to meet with me there. It was good to meet your wife and to see what you're hard at work at, educating your fellow citizens, our fellow citizens, on some of these issues, and keep up your good work in spite of the discouragement. It can sometimes can come on us a bit of discouragement as we try to communicate truth to people through limited resources when they're being so overwhelmed, bombarded with lies and propaganda from the other side. But keep up your good work. You are still a soldier in Canada, doing the work of a soldier to defend Canadians from this false illusion that is being thrown upon us by the globalists and by people like Trudeau and Carney and Poilievre to some extent. So thank you for your good work. We will look forward to speaking with you again. And this is certainly this topic of tariffs and fentanyl and and the U.S. border and our military preparedness, all these topics, and political, the foreign influence in political affairs. These are huge issues, and we need to keep our ear to the ground and our eyes, scanning the horizon for all these threats that are coming upon us, because we live in a troubled age. The technological revolution has been benefit in some ways, but it's also been challenge in some ways, because those who are attempting to confuse or undermine the Canadian nation, they also have access to these great technological tools, and they have a lot more money behind them. So we'll keep pushing forward as citizens and as patriots to protect our country as best we can from the foreign influence, from the drug traffic and the money laundering and the lies that are fueling all this. So thank you for being with us today. And any final word for our members that you'd like to share before we close?
Well, I just want to say thank you for giving me this opportunity to express my opinions based on research. And I just want people who witness this little video that you just prepared, that everything I've said in this video, everything I've said in this little interview is based on research that I know is true. And as I've been saying for 5 or 6 years now, since all this stuff started coming up with COVID and so on, that we have to speak truth to power. And that's what I've been trying to do for the last 5 or 6 years. And I'm not going to quit. I'm going to keep this up until I can.
Well,
thank you very much for having me.
Well, thanks, Lloyd. And we will put a couple of links to some of this information in our show notes when we put out this video. And it should be coming out on Thursday of this week. And God bless you. Continue on in the good fight and enjoy that beautiful view of the Bow River. I think that's a kind of a famous river. I always feel some special affinity to the Bow River. It flows through a place where there's a lot of patriots and a lot of people who are concerned and doing the best they can for our country. So thanks, Lloyd. Thanks for your service to our country back in the Army and now today.
Thanks, Rod. Have a good day.
Yeah, you too. Bye-bye.